Hello everyone, I'm Daniel Fish from Historic Beverly, and I'm going to talk to you today about the Israel Thorndike portrait that we have in our collection. This portrait of Israel Thorndike is a copy of a painting done by noted Boston artist Gilbert Stuart. You may be more familiar with Stuart's portrait of George Washington, as that portrait was the painting that was used on the $1 bill. This portrait of Thorndike that you see here was done by artist Otis, a contemporary and a student of Gilbert Stuart. This brief talk will provide some background and details about the portrait, as well as discuss the histories of both Israel Thorndike and the artist Otis. During the talk, I will be switching between sharing some slides and viewing the portrait. I will try to let you know when I'm about to switch because there may be a slight delay during transitions. So right now, we will be switching back to our PowerPoint presentation and going to our first slide. Israel Thorndike was born in Beverly on April 30th, 1755. Thorndike was a local businessman who amassed a fortune through maritime trading as well as investments in many other businesses. His personal life was a bit rocky as he had 3 wives and 12 children. In 1787, Thorndike was one of the delegates from Beverly to be considered adopting the United States Constitution. He served in the Massachusetts House and Senate, and Thorndike was also appointed the first president of the Beverly Bank from 1802 until 1810. He died at the age of 77 on March 8, 1832, and is buried in Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, Massachusetts. When Thorndike died, his estate was worth more than $1 million, which by today's standards would be roughly $30 million. Seen here on the left is a miniature portrait of Thorndike from our collection. This miniature was completed in his early life as a young man around the age of 30. The miniature is done in a gouache on a sheet of ivory. On the right is the Otis portrait of Thorndike, and he is looking older with graying hair and an aged complexion. Here he would be in his 50s or 60s. We'll be moving on to our next slide. This image is a black and white watercolor from our collection of the Andrew Cabot house. The house is currently, as we know it, Beverly City Hall, but at one time the building was the residence of Israel Thorndike. When he passed away, his family acquired ownership and his children sold it to the city in 1840 to be the new town hall. We're moving on to our next portrait. Seen here is a comparison of the 2 Thorndike portraits that are in public collections. On the left is our Thorndike portrait, a copy by Otis. It is an oil painting on canvas, and like many of Otis's canvases, this one was left unsigned by the artist. On the right is the Gilbert Stuart portrait of Thorndike. This portrait is in the collection of the Harvard Art Museum, and it is an oil painting on a wood panel. There are some varnish issues with our piece, which gives the portrait a yellow hue, but overall the portraits are close. Even with the yellowing varnish of our portrait, you can see that Otis's color palette was ashen and not the vibrant rosy color palette compared to Gilbert Stuart's. We'll be moving on to our next slide. Looking closely at our Thorndike portrait reveals fine brushwork details as seen here on the left in the ruffle of Thorndike's collar. The use of light and dark shades of white, along with the skillful brush strokes, adds movement and depth to the collar details. The use of light to highlight the importance of the documents in Thorndike's hands offers us the thought that the artist knew what he was doing when he was trying to create the curve and the fold of the papers as Thorndike holds them in his hands. Otis also had the skill to use very small details to add highlights to the face. Seen here, you can see the small dot of flesh tone paint on the tip of his nose and the bridge of his nose as well to indicate a light source. Not to go unnoticed are the fine reflections of light in Thorndike's eyes. And before I move back to the actual portrait itself to examine some details up close, I would like to tell you about the artist Otis. We'll be moving on to our next slide. Bass Otis was born in East Bridgewater, Massachusetts in 1784 to a well-established family, with his father being a physician. He apprenticed at an early age as a scythe maker or a nail and tack manufacturer, and was known for making drawings in chalk on the bellows of the forge, which demonstrated early technical skills in his life. Otis had a prolific artistic career that spanned from 1812 to 1861 and was spent primarily in Philadelphia and Boston, where he specialized in portrait painting. In 1815, he patented the perspective protector, a device to aid artists. Otis was also credited with producing the very first American lithograph in 1819. Otis studied for over 3 years with Gilbert Stuart before leaving Massachusetts for New York City in 1808 at the age of 24. However, he only stays there for a few years before heading to Philadelphia with letters of introduction from Gilbert Stuart in his pocket. This is to help him establish his name in the new city. His years between 1812 and 1858 are murky and lack details, but based on the exhibits that he entered, he traveled between Philadelphia and Boston quite a bit, and undoubtedly made both temporary homes at one time or another. He died in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1861. Even though the artist was so prolific, other than the legacy of his work and his notebook held in the collection of the American Antiquarian Society, there's very little documentary evidence for the details of Bass Otis's life. Seen here is a self-portrait that Otis did of himself at the age of 76. It is an oil painting on tin and is also in the collection of the American Antiquarian Society. It is the last known work of the artist. This brings us back to our spotlight object from Historic Beverly's collection, the Israel Thorndike portrait. We're going to transition to the portrait itself, live feed. Now I'm going to show you some of the details of the painting. You may possibly see my hands moving into view as I pick up the camera. Just one moment. Be picking up the camera. We'll be moving in towards the neck. Here, the use of light to highlight the importance of the brushwork detail of the collar. You can see the detail in the brush strokes that indicate the intricacy of the paint itself. Moving down to the hands, we can see the use of light to highlight the document's importance in his hands and how the artist knew how to dictate a light source and how it reflected off of both his fingers and highlighting the documents. Next, we'll be moving up to his face. And here you can see the small details of highlights to the face and the light reflections in Thorndike's eyes, on the tip of his nose, the bridge of his nose, as well as the upper parts of his eyeballs. And now I'm going to be pulling back the camera, setting it down, and I'll be sharing my screen with you for our last few final words. Moving on to our next slide. Are there any questions? All images that are from the Historic Beverly collection can be found in our online collection here at the link listed on the screen, beverlyhistory.pastperfectonline.com. We also referenced a few images found at the collection of the Harvard Art Museum as well as the American Antiquarian Society. Remember to follow our Facebook page and check out our website for upcoming tours, events, and other dates. Thank you for attending this Spotlight Talk. We look forward to seeing you at another program soon.